Let's look at Chelsea v Manchester City then. And Jonathan, Doku is top of the WhoScored form rankings. Absolutely stupendous week last week, involved in most of the goals. Just seems to be allowed to play, Doku, because I'm sure if he was doing anything he shouldn't be, Pep wouldn't be picking him. But he just looks like he's really enjoying his football, and he's kind of a free spirit on the wing for City.
Yeah, I mean, you always wonder with Guardiola whether there's wheels within wheels, because Doku is not playing in the way that we've really seen any winger play for Guardiola's side before. Maybe bits of early Mahrez, but we know that Guardiola is obsessed by control, and Doku does not give you control. I mean, he's the way he can dribble on either foot seemingly equally well, I think is remarkable. Must be incredibly difficult to defend against. He's very good at doing that sort of stop and start again. So you think of was it the first goal against one of the goals against Brighton anyway, where it was Pascal Gross he does just stops. No, it was Igor. So stops then goes again, and so he can go either way. He can stop and go. As a dribbler, he's brilliant. His end product at the minute clearly is brilliant. But I do wonder why he's not going through the same process of reprogramming that Jack Grealish went through. And we'll find out in time, I guess, whether Guardiola is sort of letting him play and sort of building his confidence up and sort of thinking, this is fine against a Bournemouth. I think it's interesting Grealish started against Manchester United, that the more serious game, they play the more conservative player. I think the stats show pretty clearly that when opponents have attacked City, it tends to have been down the City left to Doku's side. Doku actually, his tackling stats are pretty good, but I still think because he loses the ball quite a lot, it does render whoever the left fullback, whether it's Ake or whether it's Gvardiol, it does leave them a bit vulnerable. They can be isolated. So, yeah, if it was anybody other than City, we wouldn't be talking about this. We'd be just saying Doku is brilliant. What an amazing start. Because it's Guardiola, you sort of think, that doesn't conform to the sort of slightly counterintuitive way that we know Guardiola likes to operate. How is that going to play out against Liverpool in a couple of weeks? Maybe even against Chelsea on Sunday. How is it going to play out in the quarterfinal, semi-final of the Champions League? But as I say, it may be that he's just letting Doku play at the minute because he thinks they'll win the games anyway. It's a good way of saying to Grealish, not that keen on the way you celebrated the treble. Maybe you want to rein that in a bit. Maybe don't think your place is secure. And it may be that Grealish comes back in as the season goes on and Doku does undergo that process of reprogramming.
Well, in terms of dribbles per 90, if we look at City players under Pep, Doku is far and away top with 4.9 dribbles per 90. The player underneath him in second is Leroy Sané in 17-18, 3.2. So this is not.
Well, and look at what happened to Sané.
Wasn't it that he wanted to go to Bayern?
I think there's a reason why he wanted to go there, which was he felt he was being curtailed.
In hamstring.
There was a sort of friction, definitely, between Sané and Guardiola.
Yeah, it's a massive drop, though, isn't it? 4.9 down to 3.2. And Doku has made a sensational start to the Premier League life.
Is there also an argument here that with Kevin De Bruyne out, they are clearly two very, very different footballers, albeit both pretty effective. But De Bruyne's role within that City team is basically he's the only one who doesn't have to play by the constraints of what Pep wants, both in and out of possession. So with De Bruyne not in there, is there room for another player just to have a bit of a free role, effectively? Like even if he does play on the left hand side and all shifts around, like if it's Bernardo playing where De Bruyne normally plays on the right hand side of the three, then you've got a player there who's way more disciplined in what he does than De Bruyne was. So therefore, you open up the kind of mechanism for there to be someone who's allowed to express themselves. Like it does seem weird how normally it takes time for these players who come in at City to understand what's asked of them. Like if you look at the player that Grealish is now compared to what he was at Villa, like they're very, very different players. But Doku, even at a young age, has come in and basically just been told, go and do what you like.
Also, I guess, is Pep just so happy with his defence now, Jonathan? The system he's got where quite a lot of the time he'll play 3 or 4 centre backs, so auxiliary defenders really as defenders. Is it just that he's now so happy with his defence that they can afford to have a player doing the things that Doku just let off the leash?
Definitely, I think there's a truth to the fact that the fullbacks are not as attacking as they were, certainly not on the left.
Yeah, Cancelo used to play there, didn't they?
Yeah, and Walker still does get forward on the right. So yeah, it may be that because there's less need to sort of integrate with the attacking fullback, and your Grealish was constantly having to integrate with Cancelo. And I think what he found really difficult about that is the Grealish, when he dribbles, is quite right-footed. And so he likes to come inside, and Cancelo also goes inside. So Cancelo was often in Grealish's space. And that creates a slight clogging effect. Whereas if you don't have the left back overlapping or underlapping, then you have got a more solid platform, and maybe the player on that side does have a slightly freer role. So yeah, I mean, it's Guardiola's got such a sort of sense of a balance of his team that I think both that and the point George makes about De Bruyne may influence his thinking on that. But again, I think we'll see the true measure of it in I think the next couple of weeks is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, let's look at Chelsea then. Unbelievable game on Monday night at Tottenham Hotspur. I'm not sure how good Chelsea actually were, but they won 4-1. They've only lost one game in 7 matches now, George. Is Poch starting to get a handle on what his best team is, etc. at Chelsea?
Maybe. I mean, it sounds weird to say it, but I almost came away from that game less convinced that Chelsea are going to come good than I was before. I think there was a weird...
I'm exactly the same. Even though Jackson scored a hat-trick, I came away from that game less convinced that he's a good player.
I actually thought he was all right in the first half. I thought he linked play pretty well.
At all.
You've got to... there are always going to be 2 types of strikers. I said it before on the show. Like, he's got the kind of Cavani knack of being in the right place at the right time. And then even if you can't finish, you're probably going to score a few goals just by measure of being able to have that pace and behind and the movement in the box. He's just got to stop leaning backwards whenever he shoots. It was a bizarre... I couldn't sleep after that game. I was like buzzing off the back of it. It was just great. It was like watching a horror film and then trying to go to bed afterwards. It was mad. Mayhem. Is he getting to grips with it? Possibly. It was a weird... I do kind of feel, in a way, for Chelsea in that second half. Like, when you're used to playing against 10 men, you're used to playing against a low block, and it's all about keeping the ball, moving the ball, trying to tire out the opposition whilst also looking for the holes. It's not very often that you play against 9 men who employ a ridiculously high line, and it seems to take them about 25 minutes to work out. You've basically got to advance the ball right up against that line and then try and play through your striker who has a complete... pace advantage over the and when they did that, they scored 3 very quickly. We'll see. I still think that Chelsea will be okay. I think probably getting 3 goals into Jackson is going to be a good thing, and Nkunku's still to come back, albeit maybe the confidence that Jackson built up was extinguished when he smashed one over the bar in the 98th minute to try and make it 4, try and get his 4th. So he's getting there with his what team he wants. Reece James' return is obviously important. It still feels like the Enzo, Caicedo, Gallagher trio is a little bit clunky. Enzo's a brilliant passer, but it feels like they need someone who's just got that slightly more creative spark, who can create in tight spaces, rather than Enzo, whose long passing is great, Caicedo knits things together, and then Gallagher, who's just a bit of a battering ram.
Yeah, I've got to say I've been impressed with Gallagher in recent weeks. Also been impressed with Cole Palmer, Jonathan, and it is, of course, the Cole Palmer derby this weekend. It already feels like he's become quite important. I think when everyone in the game felt like they were losing their head at one point, Palmer was that one bit of calm on the pitch, I felt.
Yeah, and I think that's been true all season, actually. I think since he came into the team, sort of 5 or 6 games into the season, he's the one who just seems to be around going, why is this mad? Just stop doing mad things. Just sort of, if you've got the ball 8 yards in front of the goal, just kick it in the goal. It's not that hard. The fact he grabbed that penalty, he seems to have a sort of a ruthlessness that is otherwise lacking at Chelsea. And I agree. I think on Monday, what I thought was what I thought that Postecoglou was doing was playing that high line to mess with Chelsea's heads. That he'd looked at their forward line and thought, that's not a forward line that can think on its feet. It's short on confidence, and we'll mess with them. And then as soon as they start to work out, have a runner from deep, 2 or 3 passes hit the runner, which they finally did sort of 70 minutes, 75 minutes. That Kukurea chance was the first time I actually did that. I thought he'd then drop back to something more orthodox, and then he didn't. And I thought, because at the time I was thinking, this is brilliant. He's realised psychologically he's sort of breaking them psychologically. And it was a bit like and I don't know anything about rugby, so what I'm about to say may not make sense. But do you remember when England played Italy? I think it was 2017, when Italy refused to challenge any ball on the ground. So a ruck was never formed, there was never an offside line, which meant that Italy could go and challenge the fullback. And people who follow rugby say that this is known as a sort of little loophole in the laws. But actually, it's really easy to should take you 5 minutes to work out how you're going to play through it. And England, because it was so regimented under Eddie Jones, couldn't do it till half time. And then they suddenly score a load of tries quickly in the second half because Eddie Jones had told them what to do. And it felt a bit like that. A team going, oh, this should be really easy, but oh God, what do we do? It doesn't make any sense. There's all this space, but we can't use it somehow. And when they do get a chance, their heads are so scrambled they can't actually hit the target anyway. And so I can't remember how I started this point, but I think what I was building to say is this Chelsea are not a team yet who are capable of thinking on their feet, and that is a concern. Whereas apart from Cole Palmer, who just seems to be like, "What are you doing? Just this is obvious. Just do it." And I think he could end up, because of that, I think he could end up being a really valuable player for Chelsea this season because he's the one whose head seems to be in the right place.
Yeah, with that in mind, George, who do Oddschecker think is going to win the Six Nations next year? Right.
I'm not going to dig that with a response.
Yeah, we're talking about Cole Palmer, but I've got the combined 11 here in front of me, and Cole Palmer is not in the combined 11. It's
do we
an
think he'll
4-4-2.
get in the England squad today?
No. Too soon. I'm not sure there'll be anyone new in this England squad.
He's 7-2 to go to the World Cup. Sorry, to go to the Euros.
Is it?
I mean, there's a lot of talent in those areas. I think you have to do something spectacular to get in. What's Sterling to go to the Euros?
Well, I guess Maddison is possibly injured, isn't he?
That's true.
Let me
Sterling?
get the prices up. So we've got Sterling's 11-10. So basically a coin toss.
I can't see any new faces being in this squad this close to the tour.
Well, it's just they need somebody to replace Maddison. So maybe Sterling's form's been good enough this season to get him back in. Although he hasn't been picked for a squad since the World Cup, and you do wonder whether that going home after the burglary, whether that sort of has affected his standing.
Yeah, well, let's look at the combined 11. Then it's an old-fashioned 4-4-2 for who scored. We've got Ederson in goal, a back four of Kyle Walker, Thiago Silva, Akanji, and Gvardiol. Then Foden, Rodri, Gallagher, and Doku is the midfield four, and it's Alvarez and Haaland up top. Right then, predictions for this one. Then Chelsea against Manchester City. I'll go first, and I've gone big. I've gone for Chelsea 0, Manchester City 3. Jonathan,
1-0 to City.
1-0 to City, and George.
4-1 to City.
4-1 to City. That's a bold prediction as well.